position to act strong. Just be careful and don't get caught up in a big pot with top pair weak kicker, as somebody may be allowing you to bet their hand for them so they can hide the strength of their hand and then trap you later. If you're in late position and it's check to you, bet your pair. If you're in late position and someone bets before you, consider raising him. More likely than not, anyone else left in the pot other than the person who bet will fold, leaving you to go one-on-one. The great thing about raising is you find out with near certainty where you are in the hand. If someone flat calls your raise, chances are you are up against a hand. If someone re-raises you and you have a good but not a great hand, chances are you're beat, and you can find out now rather than on the next street. Look at it this way. If you flat call a bet versus raising, but you're willing to call the same bet on the next street, you're actually out the same amount of chips in either scenario. But with the raise scenario, it will be much more likely that you will know where you stand in the hand. Plus, remember, the nice thing about raising is, oftentimes your opponents will fold. Another thing to think about is even if your opponent does call your bet, it is possible he will check to you next time, enabling you to see a free card if that fits your strategy for the hand. Occasionally, you will flop a hand like two pair, top pair with a strong kicker, or a flush or straight draw, maybe even a set. These are all very strong hands, but depending on the other cards on the flop, they may hold possibilities for another player to have or draw out to a better hand. These are often make or break hands in a tournament and can cost you lots of chips unless you play them really well. If you're in early position, you bet out right away, and if you get raised, or if more than one re-raise comes after your initial bet, you might consider someone got lucky on you and flopped a better made hand. Don't get trapped. Again, your two pair will have only a 9% chance of making it to a full house to beat your opponent. No matter how great your hand looks, if you believe your opponent who has raised you, get out. Holdem can get more challenging after the flop because really anything can and will happen. You know what you have right now, but how can you be sure that your cards have the best chance of ending up the winning hand? Besides analyzing your opponent's game for telltale signs of bluffing, which we'll cover in its entirety in another video, by the way, you need to learn how to read the board to calculate possible hands that your opponent may have and count your own outs. An out is a card that will improve your hand to the point that you believe you will then have the best hand if that card comes up. The first thing to keep in mind is that after the flop, you have seen only 5 cards. The 2 cards in your hand and the 3 cards on the board. That means you are looking to catch your outs amongst the 47 cards that you haven't seen yet. For instance, say you're holding a 6-5 of clubs and the flop has come 4 of hearts, 3 of spades, 10 of diamonds. You are guaranteed the best hand on the turn with any of the 4 remaining 7s in the deck or any of the 4 remaining 2s in the deck, because you make the nut straight with these 2 cards. So this particular hand has 8 outs. Many people think that the fact that there are 8 cards left in the deck to give them the absolute best hand means that they have good odds and should bet the heck out of it. Not the case. Remember, if you believe that you need to make your straight to win the hand, 8 outs that will make it guess what? There's also 39 cards in the deck that won't. Even if a 5 or a 6 comes off and gives you a pair, remember that there's still a 10 on the board. And presumably your opponent has stayed in the hand this long, he's got something. So you can most likely assume that your pair of 5s or 6s won't hold up. When you look at it this way, you begin to realize just how risky it is to stay in with drawing hands. 8 cards to win, 39 cards to lose. Don't be afraid to bet and play drawing hands, but remember that a drawing hand is always behind a made hand. Even if the made hand is a pair of deuces, you're still behind. Let me give you an example. Let's say you're holding an ace-5 offsuit, and the flop comes 3, 4, king. Any of the 4 remaining 2s in the deck will give you a straight, and any of the 3 remaining aces in the deck will give you top pair. However, let's say your opponent has been betting like crazy and you think he might have just flopped a set on you. If this is the case, then your only hope is to get one of the deuces in the deck to win this particular hand. On the other hand, if you put your opponent on top pair and your aces are still alive, you need to include those 3 aces when calculating your outs. Your position relative to the button should also be taken into account. If you're holding a hand with fewer outs, it's only worthwhile for you to stay in the pot if there's little chance of a raise after you. The better your position, the less likely a raise will occur, thus increasing the value of your hand. Of course, determining your own outs is not always that obvious because you're not always looking for the best hand you could make. You're just looking for a hand that's better than what your opponent probably has. These are times when you want to figure out how many outs you have against all possibilities of what your opponent could have. Now follow me here, this is kind of a complex example. For example, say you're holding the ace of diamonds and the queen of clubs. The player right before you bets. You raise, he calls. The flop comes ace of hearts, 8 of clubs, and 5 of spades. Your opponent checks. You bet and he raises. What do? Do you fold? You call his raise? Let's examine what possible hands would beat you. You're probably going to put him on a pair of aces, maybe something like ace-king, 2 pairs, ace-8, ace-5, something like that. You're probably not going to put him on 8-5 since he raised before the flop. He could even be holding pocket aces, pocket 8s, or pocket 5s. So that means there are 2 aces, 4 kings, 3 8s, and 3 5s that are still left unaccounted for in the deck. Now follow me here. This means your opponent could have ace-king 8 ways, ace-8 and ace-5 6 different ways, pocket 8s and pocket 5s 3 ways each, and pocket aces 1 way. Now that we have determined that, let's determine your outs against all of the possible hands. You have 3 outs to beat ace-king, that is, if any of the 3 remaining queens come off. You have 3 outs to beat ace-8, with also any 3 of the remaining